this album that came out.
Not guilty.
Album that came out, so much recognition, 3 nominated Grammy Awards.
Yes, thank you.
When you was approaching this album and came up with this album, did you foresee this coming?
Yeah, from the first day, absolutely. You're not gonna win the championship if you don't see yourself win the championship. Every day we worked on this album, it's a 2.5-year process with me, Cuz Lightyear, and No ID. Every day of that, I've convinced myself more and more that this was the best album in the year that it dropped, which was 50 years of hip hop, and that it was Grammy worthy. So we'll see what the voters said, but we absolutely thought every single day was worthy.
Growing up in Atlanta, being this is MLK Day, what's the significance like for you, just being that you grew up on it, seeing this every year? And
for me, it's a culmination of an education poured into me at Collier Heights Elementary, Frederick Douglass High School, later Morehouse College. It's the common man's education that my grandfather taught me about Dr. King and his family. It is the Atlanta folklore and mythology that a black kid, with only 60 years out of segregation now, can and will accomplish anything he sets his mind to. Not that obstacles won't be in the way, but that the opportunities are infinite and the possibilities are there if one is willing to work hard.
What does it mean to you to perform in your city on this day?
Man, you're gonna make me show them bucks. Second performance. The first one was with my group on the Jewels. Proud day. Coming out here as a solo kid named Michael from the West Side could be even prouder. So between this and performing for the Braves with Big Boy, I can absolutely say, man, I've lived every hometown hero story. I'm just waiting for the Falcons to call next.
Now, you mentioned the West Side. There's a lot going on in terms of housing in the West Side.
Yeah.
You're from there. And the conversation today from MLK on MLK's Day was about housing at
Yes.
JP Morgan Chase.
Yep.
How do we start these conversations about housing equality, housing equity, and making sure that there's more black home ownership in Atlanta?
Well, shouts out to my man Roy, who helped lead that conversation. Shouts out to John Hope Bryant, who's leading the conversation. Black man, stout businessman who's leading the conversation about helping black people get financially literate, get their credit scores up so that home ownership grows. We know when home ownership grows, we know that the quality of education grows. I'm product of that from the Collier Heights Elementary School, from the Collier Heights community. We know that when blacks are financially literate and when given opportunities, they're not redlined, they create sustainable neighborhoods that create people that reinvest. If you did not have the Cedar Grove community, the Collier Heights community, would you have a TI? Well, what's the significance of having a TI? TI just built 143 affordable housing units right there on the west side, right where he used to trap and sell that. That is a significant thing because what it teaches is that the same ambition you have as a petty drug dealer, as a teenager wanting to be Scarface, you can use to becoming an actual businessman that invests in housing in your community. My wife and I, Shayna Renda, is an amazing real estate developer. She's working right now on a deal to bring more affordable housing along that corridor in the Bluff. And we're also building Bankhead Seafood as an actual restaurant that families can go to within 15 minutes of their house and they don't have to drive 30 minutes north or 30 minutes south. So along with having sustainable housing, having the structures that support sustainable housing is important. It's important that grocery stores and drugstores get back in our community. It's important that small and medium businesses are supported, which is why we're bringing Bankhead Seafood back. So I don't only want us to be able to live there, I want us to be able to not have to drive 40 minutes to a Whole Foods. I want us to be able to hit you in walking distance from the parks and exercise areas. So we have done a job of investing. I think Atlanta, whether it's me, T.I., Jeezy, or 2 Chainz, is grooming a system of athletes and entertainers that are going to do that. And I believe that private and public partnerships can help that grow. So I want black people, like at the Rice Center and what they're doing, what the Russell family is doing to become more financially literate, to be lined up for the next 20, 30 years of jobs in tech and outside. I'd like to see the West Side remain, if not all, a predominantly black enclave, because we know that helps economics in our community. We know that helps politicians get elected. We know that helps this state be a more progressive state.
Mike, you also mentioned voting.
Yes.
Running to the polls, so to speak.
Yes.
Why is that important that we get a full, strong turnout this year?
On a hyper-local level, it's very important that you stay engaged because hyper-locally is where the change happens. When you look at $40 million a few years ago coming down the pipeline for trade schools, Atlanta would have gotten skipped had it not been for Vincent Fort. If Vincent Fort wouldn't have raised hell about it, we wouldn't have had the trade schools blossoming on Metropolitan that we have now. So for me, it's important on a hyper-local level. I know it's sexy to argue about who's going to be president, but it's sexier to know who you're voting for judge, who your prosecutors are going to be, it's who your mayor's going to be, who they're going to anoint as police chief. So it's just on a hyper level. Get to know your city council person. I talked to Antonio Lewis the other day, fine city council person. I think he's amazing. think he could be lined up to be one of Atlanta's future mayors. Told him I didn't want to see him doing bills like Pooh Shiesty mask, but I thought he had an excellent bill that would have given Black Atlantans or Atlantans period essentially gun locking mechanisms in their cars so kids breaking into cars wouldn't have firearms. I thought that was excellent. The city should have gotten behind it. So I want to see more young legislators. I want to see more young people in city council. I want to see more progressive mayors like the one we currently have and his work around housing. So on a hyper-local level, the vote is important. Whoever's going to be president is going to be a bigger argument, but hyper-locally, you should care about who's going to be your mayor, who your state representatives, and who your governor more than anything.
Mike, you were talking about like the expansion of the exposure for young Black kids and career choices. What did that mean to you to have scientists and engineers be so successful commercially and opening up with that today?
Well, man, it's been huge. I mean, thank Dre and Future just for doing the record. Thank Atlanta for cornerstoning Michael as an album this year and allowing it to be called Album of the Year on so many lists and coming home with that Grammy as the goal. It means a lot to me because I grew up in a Black neighborhood that was totally Black. The only time I saw white people were on PBS. Thank God for Fred Rogers and Bob Ross, right? But I had such a plethora. We had Black Muslims, we had Black Catholics, we had Black scientists and engineers, we had Black working class folks that were nurses and dump truck drivers like my grandparents. So it showed me that every opportunity was available that I chose and that I worked at. My grandmother sent me out with every tradesman you could. The carpenter, the electrician, the car and body guy, they all came back and said the same thing. Immensely talented kid, smart as a whip, ain't gonna do nothing with his hands, Betty. So you better hope he's smart enough to get a good job. Luckily, I get to sing and dance with you guys, but I want Atlanta to remain a place of infinite possibilities for all children, but especially for Black children.
Mike, you mentioned several times about your recent album and how important bringing home a Grammy would be, not only for yourself but for Atlanta.
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more for me?
Me bringing home a Grammy for Atlanta would be equivalent to the Braves bringing home another championship, the Hawks bringing home their first, and the Falcons bringing home their first. I'm a product of this city. And I mean a product of the city in every way. I don't care if you're talking about Bob Horner, Chipper Jones, Steve Barkowski, Billy White Shoes Johnson. I'm a product of Dominique Wilkins, Doc Rivers. I'm a product of Deion Sanders. I'm a product of every sports player that's poured into the youth. I'm a product of what Ted Turner did in giving free Braves tickets away for kids who read well. I'm a product of this city now, and Tony Rexler giving my wife and I an opportunity to have a swag shop up. What I would like to do is return a championship through a Grammy to this city, because this city has poured so much into me. And if you've heard the album Michael, you're hearing more than my autobiography. You're hearing the story of a boy in Atlanta.
What kind of impact do you think MLK has in Atlanta to the young people out there that are kind of watching you today? What kind of impact do you think?
I think he's a measuring stick as a young person. He's a measuring stick that's an alternative narrative to what we hear. We know this country was started. A lot of people don't know this. The first 7 years Georgia existed, there was no slavery in Georgia. Oglethorpe, who I founded, didn't want slavery here, was not a believer in it. Then 7 years down the line, you see the Carolinas taking off between tobacco and cotton and other stuff. You're like, we got to get in the money game. So you start to see that slavery was an economic game. It was an economic game that robbed us of dignity, robbed us of respect, robbed us of humanity. But at the end of the day, it was about money. You did get to see, once emancipated, Blacks start to make very quick strides into land ownership and into development in this. I believe that Georgia, if we're honest about our history and where we've come from, we have an opportunity in that transparency to create a type of union that understands the past and what we were, but Dr. King gives us a marker on who we can be. Whether it was the SCLC and they're partnering with other people and other leads from other ethnicities, whether it was Andy long after he left, whether it was Hosea, whether it was Reverend James Orange, that legacy, and especially in his wife Coretta, got carried for the next 40 years. And I think that if all of us do our little bit to carry our part of King's legacy, that it will do a lot, not only for this city, but globally.
What do you think about the Atlanta Hawks right now? As you just mentioned, of course, your
right now at halftime, they're my favorite team in the world. We kicking ass. I want to see my guys run up and down that court and win championships. I'm like everybody else running around screaming Trey and Murray. Shouts out to my man Collins. I miss him. I think that the Hawks are like Atlanta. We're frickling our way out, and I think that like Atlanta, we better learn to play some good defense against these developers and outsiders trying to change our life.
You mentioned. Can you explain the jacket, the significance of the jacket?
This is a jacket. I'm forgetting the name of the company right now, but it's a Black-owned company. It's a jacket, but the significance of this jacket for me is two of my absolute heroes on here, Dr. King and South Shakur. More Black people and more liberators. This jacket just simply tells a story that doesn't get told in America enough. This country was built by an amazing group of founding forefathers. Right? You cannot deny that the Bill of Rights and the United States Constitution is an amazingly brilliant and beautiful aspirational writing. But the people who brought those aspirations to life were people like Harriet Tubman, people like Sojourner Truth, people like Frederick Douglass, people like Martin King, people like Medgar Evers, people like that, Malcolm X. If we don't have those people that make America measure up to the measures that she set, this country never gets to be the beautiful republic that it has potential to be. So that's
You mentioned, anti-racist action. It can be very hard for companies or people in this community to trust companies. How do you build that trust amongst the community and companies, that sometimes have historically...
Well, companies have to engage the people that are actually doing the work in the community, whether it's LaToya over at Park Kids right on Bankhead Highway, Gary Davis at Next Level Boys Academy, Christy over at Georgia Youth Build. And I want companies, the people in their diversity, equity, and inclusion departments to Google those names, Google those organizations, and get some money their way. The people that are doing the work are there to do the work. The companies should be funding the work that's being done. We don't need you to create your own 501c3s and what you think your company should. We need you to find the people that are already doing the work and put money in those people's hands. You want to help young black boys? Find out the young black men in the community that are thwarting violence, that are pushing education, that are doing it, and get those people money. The money will help those companies, will help, just the same way you scale a business up, they will help those 501c3 scale up. We don't need you to reinvent the wheel. We need you to help bring some new tires to the wheels that are already rolling.
What do you want to see in the new Falcons head coach?
What I want to see in the Falcons head coach, a winner. That's what I'd like to see. I'd like for us to, and I love the Falcons. Like I said, they've been breaking my heart since '83. Shouts out to Barkowski. I think that we need a coach much like our owner that wants to win. I don't know if that means other changes besides the coach, but I just know the Falcons have a fan base that's rabid about them. But I don't want to become like the Cleveland Browns and just cheerfully cheering for losing. I want to win sometimes. So let's get a championship.
All right, guys, we're gonna just do photos if anyone wants.